Like Ashish said, we run a bootstrapped company based out of Delhi. Ashish really told me that Bangalore needs to hear a bootstrap success story. I wouldn't call ourselves as a success story as yet, and you'll see why. But I'm happy to just talk about where I come from and where we are right now. So that's me doing a sort of a bad attempt at a somersault somewhere, and it's just the image is just an example of sort of the crazy path that you can take if you have an idea and you really believe in yourself. And it also exemplifies the whole idea that you don't have to walk in a specific manner, or you don't have to act in a specific manner. It's your idea. You can execute it whichever way you want, as long as you see some success. So we just to give you a little bit background about Wingify and myself. I started Wingify about 4 years back now, and Wingify is the company's name, but the product's name is Visual Website Optimizer. Uh, like Ashish said, the product is primarily an A/B testing product. To simplify A/B testing greatly, A/B testing just means that you have two versions of something, and you are conducting a scientific test between those two versions and see which version is more effectively. In the context of web, that means that if you have a website, you are creating different versions of a website. For example, if you're an e-commerce store, you will have different versions of the buy now button. Some button may be of the red color, some button might be of the blue color, some buttons might be big, some buttons might be small. But what you essentially do is that you split your traffic between these different versions and see which buttons get you the maximum sales. You would be surprised if you read many of our case studies how even simple tweaks in colors can bring a great difference in sales and conversions. Of course, that is not to say you cannot change, you cannot test big things, for example, the entire layouts or entire pricing, but A/B testing is what our product helps. And so what we are talking about is, like I said, the company called Wingify. It was born in late 2009. So it started in 2009, and it essentially started by me writing code on a notepad. And when people talk about what was the investment that you did in the business, the great thing about web businesses and technology businesses, as most of us know, it does not require a lot of investment. You do not require to put money in, say, machinery and all sorts of things. I just had a laptop and I bought a $20 virtual server from somewhere, and I got hold of a nice sounding domain, Wingify, and that was the entire thing. So Wingify does not mean anything. It was just a cool domain that I got, and the code didn't look half as good as what you see in the background. It was clumsy and it was very hackish, but it worked. And that was important for the first stage, whereby I didn't want to spend a lot of time getting it right, but I wanted to get the problem right, not the implementation of it right. So fast forward to this day, we are a 40 people company, and we have about 3,300 customers across the world, essentially 80 plus countries, and we are making a revenue of about $6 million now, and funding is exactly zero. So we have been bootstrapped throughout our entire journey, and that has actually helped us being very focused. So how did this happen? I think I like to believe that it has been mostly luck and some smartness. I wouldn't call it that it was very premeditated. I knew what I was doing, and it had to happen. It happened because I was trying lots of things, and some of those things just worked purely by chance. Now, if I look back, I can always connect the dots and say it had to happen. But when I was in middle of things, it was just as chaotic as it would be for most of us doing our first startups. So this is the genesis of Wingify. A lot of people ask, how did you actually come up with the idea? And the idea didn't just arrive in a shower. It has a lot of background into positioning myself in order to be able to doing a startup. It just goes back to my school days, where that typical story of father bringing a computer and you starting to do programming instead of playing games, say Road Rash, right? I could have just played games non-stop. But I got hooked on to programming, and I feel very lucky in order to stumble cross programming. So I started programming in Visual Basic 6.0. This is year, I guess, 98, 99, where it was very popular. I made small programs like calculator and very basic stuff. But I was very happy that I am able to make computer do whatever I want it to do. It may sound very simple, but when you are a kid in, say, 9th standard and you get something and you're able to make stuff, and that exactly gets translated onto the screen, it's a magical feeling, and it was a magical feeling for me. It just started from Visual Basic 6.0. I started, and it was a project called Naram Cheese, which is software for Hindi. My father just said, ki, whatever you are doing, put it on the web, and some of it was useful, and so people started contacting me. I had a nice little donation button on that web page, so even started getting donation and felt good. The first money that you get out of the product you are making or your efforts, it really felt good. And of course, as a student in 10th standard, getting some 5,000-6,000 rupees out of some program you have made, that felt really good. And then I just stumbled across lots of articles, and finally I stumbled across Paul Graham essays. So Paul Graham is the founder of a accelerator or an incubator in America, which is called Y Combinator, and he just writes lucidly. He writes so well that he ends up convincing you to do a startup. If anyone has not read Paul Graham's essays, I'll highly recommend them going through them. He'll just make you get up and do a startup right away. So that was the whole seed that I was coding, and I stumbled across the whole world of startup. I was reading stories about Yahoo, Google, and I thought, hey, I want to do a startup as well. And in college days, another interesting story whereby I majored in biotechnology. So I'm not a computer science major, I'm not an IT major. What happened was that there was that little streak of overconfidence that I had. So when it came to choosing a major, my mother and my father wanted me to take computer science. They said it's very logical that you are just spending days and nights with computers. Now why won't you take computer engineering? And I said, this is something new for me, let's just learn biotechnology. And in fact, that also, as I was saying, looking back, it helped me do a lot of stuff that I'm doing now. But it was just purely random. I just took it because I didn't know anything about biology and wanted to learn it. So within biotechnology, I started taking a lot of interest in a subfield called computational biology, where you're just solving biological problems using computer coding. So I still stuck to the coding part and did a lot of, in biology, you of course have a lot of data that you have to analyze. The DNA, the genome is huge, and the entire problem of computational biology and bioinformatics is about analyzing data. And that got me hooked onto the data analytics part. And but meanwhile, I was doing lots of projects. So in the college where you have a 2-month break between different semesters, I would do a project and call it as a startup. So it's funny looking back how in 2 months I was thinking that I would change the world, but it does not really change. So I did few things like Kroomsa, which was a music, an independent music website, and Pressimark, which was something like will find great talent on social networks, and MyJugaad.in, which was just went on to 3 or 4 iterations. Finally, it became a slideshow for web pages. But they were all failed college startups. I wouldn't even call them startups. They were more like projects. I was still in a very typical engineering mindset where I would find something cool and I would lose my sleep over it, and for 7 non-stop days I would code, put it on the web, and I would then want world to notice it, but nobody would notice it. And that's typically happened a lot of times with me. And I think that's a natural cycle whereby we eventually realize that world doesn't give a shit to what we are doing. It's just us who are losing sleep. I remember the Kroomsa days where I did not actually sleep for 3 nights. I was in my fantasy world whereby I was thinking I'll take over the entire Indian music scene. Every music store in India will have a Kroomsa CD. I'll be king of the world and all sorts of things. But it never happened. So I had a realization, and a great realization for that fact. And I realized it might be that I'm not marketing well. I'm not selling things. I'm just building things. And it just came as a sudden moment, even though I had lots of failed startups. but it came as a sudden moment that probably sales and marketing is something I really need to learn. Without that, I will probably do 5 more failed startups and feel terrible about it. So, so I graduated from engineering in 2008. I didn't start a company right away. I worked for about 2 years at a company. And I feel it's important to work somewhere before just starting out on one zone. If I were to do another startup right away from college, I feel I was naive in the sense of not knowing how the real world operates. I was in a cocoon of the engineering students where I'm surrounded by people with bright eyes and great ideas, but not knowing that taking money out of people's wallet is extremely hard. So working in another company for about 2 years gave a very good perspective. I don't think it's visible, so I'll just spell it out how I came about the idea of Wingify. This time I didn't enamor myself with a cool idea. I actually took a piece of paper and listed all of my interest. I said it's very natural for me to work where I'm interested in and where people would be willing to pay me for. So I combined my interest in technology, data analytics, and marketing. And I said I should do I should do a startup in marketing optimization. I still remember there were 10 other ideas which was just completely unrelated. But I happened to pick the top one which combined my interest and my hunch that there might be people who would be willing to pay for it. So I worked in industry and I commuted 3 hours for someone else's dream. So in Delhi, there's a suburb called Gurgaon, and it was about 3 hours. It was about 1.5 hours from my place, and I started working on an idea while I was working for someone. Of course, I told my employer that I'm working on this, and I took their permission. But it was extremely hard for me. The alternative option was, of course, that I would leave my job and do it full time. But I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it until I had enough data to prove that I can sustain myself financially out of the project I was doing. I feel moonlighting, and that too in an ethical way where you are telling your employer, is a great way to start because you have that financial backing. You won't be on the roads and struggling, because if you're struggling for even meeting your basic expenses, you won't be able to put enough focus and attention onto your startup. So I feel covering those basics financially is very important, and working for someone is a great way to ensure that you'll at least get a regular check in your bank to support your whatever project you want to do. So I was commuting every day. I was waking up at 6 a.m. in the morning, commuting for 2 hours, reaching office by 8 or 9, working till 6, then coming back by 9, and then is having quick dinner, then is when I was starting to work. So I worked during evenings and weekends. So I would typically have about 5-6 hours of sleep every day for a long time. So I worked about 8 months of part-time, and part-time was almost full-time when you think about it, how much effort is put into building things. But after 8 months, I came up with something like this. I'll give an award to anyone who could decipher what this is, because I was still in the same mindset of building cool things. So if you read about it, I was writing things like advanced optimization engine, flexible real-time targeting, and whatnot, right? And I thought everybody would know what this is. And here's how it looked. So my whole idea, which was the holy grail of marketing, was to combine everything about optimization. So there's analytics part, whereby a lot of us know Google Analytics. You see reports, you derive some insights, but what you do with those insights is not very clear. But this platform which I was building, it gave you things like optimization, where you could try out different things on your web page. It gave you things like targeting, where you could show different content to different people. What I did was I coded non-stop for 8 months. I built a lot of features and just threw them all over the dashboard. So this is the screen that a person would look at after logging in, and you can imagine as a user, you wouldn't have any clue what any of this does. And that's precisely what happened. So I launched on a forum called Hacker News, and I was very active on Hacker News. It's a great place. If anyone of you has not hung out at Hacker News, I'll highly recommend you to check it out. And by the way, hacker does not mean here in the typical hacking sense where you're breaking out in other systems. Hacker more of a means like a tinkerer, where you're naturally curious about the world and you're building stuff. And this is a forum where lots of smart people hang out and discuss, and lots of people launch their projects and ask for feedback. And that is what I did. I asked, it's not visible, but I essentially asked that I'm building Wingify. It does this and that. I provided the URL of the product and the website. And I essentially asked, what's your feedback on it? And I was very heartbroken to read all the feedback. And I was actually closing eyes, reading one comment after the other, because everyone just said, this does not make sense to me. People said, I've completely failed to get it. This is jargon overload. It took me so much of time. I still don't understand. And after 8 months of putting in efforts, and one day it is just entirely crushed, or whatever you have done. You may feel that I was disappointed, but I was more than disappointed. I wanted to die, because I had done so many of projects in college, none of them worked, and now I felt I worked in the industry, I'm mature, I have money, but even that didn't work. So I said, it's enough for me now. But it might be cliche to say, but this really worked for me, that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I took feedback in a great stride, and I tried to find patterns into the feedback, that what did I do wrong? And there were a couple of things that might be helpful to other people here. First, of course, focus matters. Instead of making a comprehensive khichdi where I would just put in everything, I was like, ye bhi dal do, ye bhi dal do, ye bhi dal do. It will be so cool. It's the best platform ever, most comprehensive one. But people get confused with all the stuff that you're throwing in. I see this sort of mistake in a lot of new products, where they set out with building something specific, but they end out building everything for everyone. And that never works out, because people have very specific problems that they want to solve. They are not really interested in other things that and the other things just confuse people. And the second and most important point I would say would be that usability and user onboarding is important, especially if you're selling a software product where people have limited attention spans. Initially what I believed was that I'll write a product and I'll make a huge and comprehensive help and manuals, and I'll provide a lot of information whereby people can learn how to use the product. But the unfortunate fact is that people have very limited attention spans. Nobody would go through help, trust me. If you're having users sign up for your product, nobody likes to read through anything. They just want things to flow smoothly. And if you're using most of the interestingly and well-designed products, like say Apple iPhone, you don't have to read and help how to use an iPhone. But that is a mistake that we do when making products, especially B2B software products. We'll write help, and a very good help for that matter, but nobody likes to read help. So it's important to see how do you onboard the users from the first sign-up stage to eventually getting enough commitment from them so that they return. So it's a very subtle kind of task that you have to make your users do, and you have to be in their shoes. And there's a lot of elements of psychology where you're taking commitment from them. Trickle by trickle, eventually they are so committed to your product that they'll end up using it quite a bit. And the last point is that I shouldn't have coded in isolation. So from the day one, I should have at least say 5 or 6 different people who are giving me constant feedback. And I could have realized my problem in the first day where I was designing a mock-up for the dashboard, which had so many features. I wish some of the early users could have seen my app right on that paper stage and could have told me that, hey boss, I'm not able to understand what you're doing. That could have saved me 8 months of effort. But finally, after finding my feet, after this fiasco, I said, fuck this shit. I discarded all the code of 8 months that I had written, and I focused on just one feature, which was A/B testing. So earlier platform did entire things from analytics to goals to segments to A/B testing, but now I said I'll focus on just one important problem, and which is A/B testing. And the way I understood and realized that A/B testing is a problem that needs to be solved is because in those days there were essentially two sorts of tools. One tool was from Google called Google Website Optimizer, which was free, but it was incredibly hard to use. And by hard to use, I mean it required you to code up different versions of your website and upload to your own website, and it just split traffic across those versions. And if you're requiring someone to code up versions of their website, that's the 90% hard task you're already asking them to do. Because the people who want to do A/B testing, those are the people who are marketers, who are product managers. They typically don't know how to code. And you're asking them to code, they're naturally going to rely on their IT team. And then that's a recipe for disaster for most companies, where marketing team is just chasing the IT team all the time and nothing is getting done. So Google as a website optimizer precisely like that, even though it was from a big name, but it was hard to use. On the other end of the spectrum, there was a tool called Omniture Test and Target. So Omniture Test and Target was a very sophisticated tool. Omniture has been acquired by Adobe for about $2 billion now. It's a very good product. Problem was that its subscription, its pricing started at say $100,000. So that just excluded most of the small and medium businesses from using a beautiful thing, as beautiful as A/B testing. So I thought this is a very good opportunity whereby can I make a product that makes A/B testing radically easy to use and implement, but at a price point most companies can actually afford. And that was genesis of Visual Website Optimizer. So I transformed Wingify as something that did entirely on and a lot of things to Visual Website Optimizer that just did A/B testing. So this time I just took 1 month in building a minimum viable product. So instead of building everything, I just was laser focused on validating my hypothesis that A/B testing could be made much more simple. And I used lots of tricks. Looking back, some of the tricks was that I didn't have a logo. So I didn't have a logo even 2 years after launching the product. I just wrote Visual Website Optimizer and that was it. I feel a lot of us get into that trap of getting the branding right, getting the logos right, the colors right. While I'm not saying that is not important, but that is not important if your problem itself is not validated. If you're spending a week getting your logo right, even while not knowing there's any customers out there for your product, they're wrong priorities in my opinion. So getting the priorities right is very important. And I had inspired design in the sense of I just looked at 37 Signals website and I felt they've been doing it for a lot of time, so I don't have to reinvent a lot of concepts. I didn't say I steal their design, but they had figured out that there's a standard for SaaS products where you have features, you have pricing, even the pricing table in a specific format. So I did not spend time in doing those things and inventing my own unique designs. I just took that and plugged in my content. I got a $5 theme from Theme Forest and put the entire app in that design. But the key thing that I got right was that there was one feature where you are able to design website variations in a visual manner. So just like you use Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, which is a drag and drop functionality, I got that right in Visual Website Optimizer. So you load up your website, you take your mouse over the headline and you create an alternative headline whereby you have that two versions. So I got that feature right whereby I was providing a visual editor, but everything else I felt was sort of on the periphery and I didn't need to invest time on it. And I got the onboarding right whereby I was giving a step-by-step fashion instead of just pushing the user to a dashboard. It was a wizard kind of interface. I asked the user, give your URL in the first step, second, define goals, and third, which is where they would design the actual variations. So it was very guided. If you talk about growth strategy, as soon as, so this is November 2009. I worked on the first prototype for about a month, and in December 2009, I opened gates for the beta. It was still free, but I made it exclusive in the sense of not everyone can get access to it. I had a form on the website where people had to tell what are the biggest challenges they are solving. I didn't let anyone use the product because I wanted feedback from them. I wanted people who were actually committed to this problem and who had this problem that needs to be solved. So So I would look at their feedbacks, why they want to use the product, and I would give them exclusive access to those products. And it really helped because initially if they're writing what sort of problems they have, you can go back to them and have a conversation that, hey, does this product really solve your problems or not? And I was also doing a lot of rapid iteration. I didn't wait for a long time to iterate on what problems the users picked up. And if I were to summarize the growth strategy in initial days, it was like I was sleeping in bed with my users. And I was just constantly on calls with them. I was screen sharing things and I was just hounding them, tell me what's wrong and how do I fix it. And a lot of people did give a lot of useful feedback. And the entire product took a shape into what users want it to be rather than what I wanted it to be. And meanwhile, I was doing this alone, and I met Sparsh, which is now my partner. He was in the same college, Delhi College of Engineering that I graduated from, but then he went on to do his master's from Oxford. So I started chatting with him and I said, hey boss, this is what I'm doing. He got interested and he started coding more and more. And I bring this up because I want to tell the value of having someone as a partner and a co-founder. And I feel it's immensely helpful to be able to share stuff with people. There's lots of things that you cannot share with employees. But you need someone that you can be brutally honest with. And you need someone who could just tell on your face that this is wrong. A lot of employees will not do it. A lot of users will not do it. But having a co-founder or a partner really helps in that sense. You're able to delegate a lot of stuff and work much faster. So the sooner you get someone you can really trust. And I feel looking for a co-founder in the sense of you hire, and I see lots of posts which say I'm looking for a co-founder. I'm not sure how successful that is because the co-founder is your best buddy, and it might not be very useful to hire a buddy, right? You cannot hire him. It has to come from somewhere organically. So I'm not sure how do you find a co-founder, but I found, and it was lucky for me. So 5 months into the beta, I had about 1,000 free users, and by free users I mean people who were using it actively, it was still free because it was beta. I had a zombie social life because I was coding. Sparsh was still doing his job in London, but he was contributing more and more. But a lot of onus was on me to get things from design to marketing to content to even sales and demos. There were days where I was giving 5 demos a day of 1 hour long, and it was repetitive. The demos and sales is not interesting, to be honest, for a B2B sales product, but I had to do it because there was no one else to do it. So 5 months after launching in March 2010, I quit my job. There was lots and lots of users, and they were giving lots of feedback, support. There was just incredible amount of work. And this is a small leap of faith I did because I didn't want to quit until I had some money out of the product. But I felt if there are 1,000 users, and that to business users, not consumers, if there were users who were using this on their websites, there will be a very small chunk who would be ready to pay for the product. I'm not sure if you can do the same thing with consumers, but with business, if they're using your product actively, they're investing in your product. Their time is the most valuable resource they have. So 2 months after quitting the job, I launched paid plans, and on the first day itself, I had 10 paying customers. So my initial humble goal was very simple. I wanted to make 50,000 rupees, which was about $1,000, $1,200, and I wanted to make 50,000 rupees because that is a salary I was getting. So I wanted to prove myself that I can make the same amount of money for myself, which I was making for someone else. That was just the goal that I had. I wanted to make the same amount of money. And actual first month revenue was $4,000. It was a great feeling that I had surpassed it by 4 times. My parents were happy and everything was going great. And but it was a lot of work after that. And I didn't stop at that. I added the features that customers wanted. Sparsh started, which is my partner, he started contributing more and more. Eventually got covered into TechCrunch. This is an interesting side note. I'll talk about it later, maybe how we actually shamed TechCrunch into covering us. They won't cover an Indian company, and that too a bootstrap company. But I was just after their life on a lot of forums, and they shamed into writing about us. And I personally love writing, and that really helped in initial days of marketing. I wrote lots of content on places like Smashing Magazine, which is the go-to online magazine for designers on the web, SEO, Moz, Copy, Blogger, and whatnot. I was just churning out articles like crazy. And when I say articles, these are not the articles that say Visual Website Optimizer is the best thing ever. Nobody would write it on their blogs. What I would rather say is that A-B testing is something that would help you. This is what A-B testing is. This is how companies do A-B testing. And these are the actual results companies get from A-B testing. And hey, by the way, I also happen to run a company that provides A-B testing too. So that was the whole strategy. And I had invested a lot of time in writing content. When people just brush off content in saying, I'll write content, chalo kuch likh diya, that never helps. As a founder or as someone who's just starting on the product, you are the one who understands the pain points the best. And you are the one who will be able to translate into something that the market cares about. So spending time on content is something I'll highly recommend. And our revenue started growing about 10% every month. And this is then about after a year, 2011, Sparsh came back. Sparsh quit his job and he took over as a CTO. He now handles our engineering and the product. And we hired our first employee and took an office. So I worked from home about 8 months. We had to take an office because there was an employee. And he said, hey, I need some place to sit. And that as our first office was just this much. We were just sitting on one table and that was our office. But 18 months into existence, we crossed our first $1 million in revenue. And it was the wildest thing I had never imagined. And during these years, this is just some of the statistics. Our code base has now grown into 800,000 lines of code. And team is now 40 people from just me in last 3 years. We have already gotten 3 acquisition offers. We haven't taken up on them, and I'll tell you why. And as Manav was saying, it's a great thing about venture capitalists contacting you when you're successful. It's ironical that as a startup, if you need money, you won't get a lot of interest from VCs. But if you don't need money, they'll be after your life to give you money. And after a while, it was so embarrassing for me if a VC is in the town and I'm focused on getting the product, building the team, and they'll say, hey, let's meet for lunch. And I'm like, I don't want to meet for lunch. What's there for me? And they'll be shocked that nobody says no to the VCs, right? Like, hey, I didn't expect this. But one has to start learning that, because after a while, the meetings were unproductive. They'll just get all the statistics and do a small talk. If you're the kind of person who likes to meet with people, no harm in that. But in those years, and still, I'm very much committed to the company. And unless I know that I'm raising capital, there's no point in just getting on a lunch and being good terms with them. If you're successful, if you're very annoying but you're successful, VCs will still invest in you. They're looking for the maths, not more of how annoying or non-annoying you are. So you can just focus on the business if you're making money. We also got right now we are about 3,300 plus customers across 70 plus countries. And we have brands like Microsoft, AMD, Disney, and in India. So there are 2 things I'd like to point out. I'm not just speaking this out as a bragging sort of thing, but more like as an Indian company, you can acquire customers globally like we have acquired. And you might be surprised to know only 5 or 6 customers out of 3,300 are Indian companies. So most of our customers are in the US, and we have no salesperson in the US. The entire operation operates from right here from India. And so I'll spend a little bit of time on this slide because this is important. We reached here because we quickly gravitated towards certain pillars that helped us. And one of the pillars was customer feedback. As I had mentioned, customer feedback was extremely important. And no matter how much focus do we give, we usually end up discounting the amount of effort we need to put. Even to this day, there's lots of things that happen automatically so as to seek feedback from the customer, so as to make them talk. For example, every support email we send, there's a form which says, was my response speedy and helpful? That forces customers to think, should I give feedback or not? And any feedback we get, we personally follow on to it. After a sales pitch or a demo, they get an automated email, how was the demo, right? And in the app also, we ask a lot of times, what are your thoughts? We just want customers to speak up. Because a lot of time customers are passive. When they're using the product, then they realize that this is a product, nobody cares about it. There's a team out there. It's sort of a layer between your aspirations and your team and between the customer. You have to somehow bridge the gap and say, hey, we are real and we care about you. And that's what we are trying to do. And the second is product. Again, by product, it's a very broad thing. I don't just mean, say, product idea or something, but the holistic experience that you are able to provide. Even early on, I realized that design was something which was very important to get. So we have always paid enormously for good design, and that really helps. And by design, I don't just mean the visual design, but all the communications that are going to the customer. They represent your product. Every email your teammate sends, every blog post you write, every pixel that you have that the customer sees, they are forming a perception of your product. So it's important to focus on the little details. Sometimes we say, hey, what happens, it doesn't matter if there's a full stop at the end of the slide or not, or if the colors are a little off, or what if I have randomly capitalizing stuff in my presentation. But customers notice, especially software, especially business customers in North America and the UK, they would just recognize even the smallest of errors in your application, and that they would hold it against you. Because generally those people are very perfectionist, and honestly, we Indians don't have a lot of reputation of being perfectionist. But you have to break out of that in order to get their attention. And the third, as I said, inbound and content marketing. Right from the day one, we have never spent on marketing per se, but we've tried to position ourselves as thought leaders in A/B testing. So we'll write everything about A/B testing, and a lot of attention comes because of that fact. And fourth, and the last, is customer service. And a lot of people are not just looking for software, but they are looking for someone they can rely on. And even right from day one, it was clear that customer service was something very important for us, because if especially in the technology businesses, competition can copy everything. They can copy your product, they can copy your design, they can copy anything. I mean, if a company like Google decides to make a good A/B testing tool, I'm sure they'll be able to make it. They have an army of product teams and engineers. But what a lot of companies cannot copy is your culture. So if you imbibe a culture of, say, customer service, even if a competitor makes a good product, they won't be able to succeed because they don't have that culture of customer service. Just to give you an example, what I mean by culture of customer service is that we required everyone, and we still require everyone in the company to take rounds doing customer service. So even as a CEO, CTO, and no matter what position you are, you will do customer service. That does two things. That lets you see that whatever work you are doing in the company, it's real, and it's not something that goes into the black hole. As the company grows, people lose the sense of contribution. As a programmer, if I'm programming day and night, how would I know that I'm doing something valuable? But if you're answering a customer's email whose business depend on what you are doing, as a programmer, that would feel really good to you, that there's someone out there who values what I'm doing. And secondly, of course, it just reinforces your whole ideology that customer service is important. And so internally, we call our customer support team as customer happiness team, and we promise our customers that we'll get back in an hour or less. And that is the culture we are trying to promote. Just as a little side note, so Ashi said I could talk about bootstrap versus funding. So to be honest, I'm not against funding per se, but I'm against the wrong notions that are associated with funding, and the fact that a lot of people feel raising funding is sort of a milestone. So I like to compare funding as a home loan. You will not celebrate when you take a home loan, but people will celebrate, hey, I took a loan from someone, and it's very ironical to celebrate taking a funding. In fact, it should be taken as something of a moral obligation, where you have to pay back your investors much more than what they have put in. If not a legal obligation, or at least why would somebody invest in your business if they're not looking forward to getting that money back, right? Investors are not really friends, but they are partners, and you should treat them as partners. And legally also, investors, a lot of times, in fact, in probably most of the times, they have legal clauses whereby 5 years down the lane, they can have your company do things that you don't want. And some of those things is getting acquired when you're not in a position to get acquired. In the worst case, maybe even liquidate your assets just to get their money back. So you all have read horror stories about this. I'm not saying don't take funding, but don't just treat it as something you have arrived and it's a good thing. And a great thing about web businesses, like I said, you don't need money for validation per se at all. Taking money and then building a product is, in my opinion, wrong way to do things. At max, you need, say, 50,000, 1 lakh rupees to sustain yourself for 6 months and have a cheap server and do things on your own. And if you're not able to get even the first iteration right in 6 months, you can always go back, work somewhere for 1 year and try it again with new insights. But you don't really need funding to prove that this is a problem that needs solving and this is a problem that people are ready to pay for. It can be done very cheaply. And no amount of funding can really buy you product market fit. So you cannot throw $1 million and say, hi, this is a problem that that customers would be ready to pay for. That you have to do with or without funding. It's entirely orthogonal to the topic of funding. But funding does make sense when you have a precise plan of what you want to do with funding. It's the only thing that I'm stressing again, that you cannot raise funding and then decide what to do with it. But you have a plan that if I raise $5 million, it is very likely that it will help me reach a $20 million revenue run rate. Then by all means, the common sense says you should raise funding. So just be very logical when you think about the question of funding. Don't just fall into the trap of, I'll get covered on TechCrunch. TechCrunch just gets you a total of 0 sales. And everybody forgets about TechCrunch because they cover about 20 startups, 30 startups every day. It's just very ego boost, but now you can have lots of things to get ego boost, right? So this is the present day. We are 40 people, and I'm very happy that we are still bootstrapped and growing, and not really needing funding so far. And I'll just spend a couple of times where we are heading. To be honest, this is something we realized very lately. Initially, my whole goal was to get to 50,000 rupees level, which we got in the first week itself. But now I'm realizing we are in a very unique position where we can do great things. And I say unique position because, to be very honest, being in India gives you an advantage to an access of great people at a much less cost as compared to, say, Silicon Valley or Europe. So if a Silicon Valley company is hiring an engineer for, say, $120K or $150K, you can hire an equally bright engineer here for, say, 25K or 30K. It's a fact. It's not good or bad. It's just fact that India has a much cheaper talent, and of course expenditures are cheap. So why not build on that fact? So if companies like Infosys, TCS have been able to build on the fact of cost arbitrage, and they have been able to define the whole services, IT services with India, why can't you define the Indian product scene, right? The India could be associated with coming up with great products like, say, Salesforce, Facebook, or Google. But we are not doing this. I'm not sure what we are not doing this, but personally for Wingify, we have set our mission that we'll become the most respected software company to come out of India. And we believe we can, because we have got things right, and we are picking up momentum. So that's all.